I think my grief-stricken wife is having an affair with her therapist, so I'm thinking of destroying. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The more I tried to rationalize her behavior, the more my mind kept spinning with doubts. Maybe I was just overthinking things. I didn't want to believe that my wife, whom I had been so deeply in love with, could be hiding something from me. But the signs were there, and they were hard to ignore. A few weeks after the wine incident, I found something that confirmed my worst fears. It was a text message, simple, casual, but it was from her therapist. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about you. I hope you're doing okay today. Call me if you need to talk, or if you just want to hear my voice." My heart sank as I stared at the screen. I had never felt such a wave of betrayal before. The words were intimate, personal, nothing like a professional therapist would ever send to a client. This was more than just a lapse in judgment, this was something more. I confronted her that night, my hands shaking as I held the phone out to her. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice tight with the weight of all the emotions I was struggling to control. She looked at the message, then at me, her face paling as she realized I had seen it. "It's not what you think," she said quickly, her voice faltering. "Not what I think," I repeated, my voice rising. "What else could it be? This is beyond inappropriate, and you know it." I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't even know how we got here. It just happened, and I was confused. He's been there for me, listening to me when I had no one else." "Listening to you?" I felt the anger bubbling inside me, and I fought to keep my voice steady. "Is that what you call this? You're not just talking about your grief anymore, are you? You're talking about something else, something I'm not a part of." She didn't answer me immediately. Instead, she looked away, her gaze drifting to the floor. Her silence was deafening, and it tore me apart to see her so withdrawn, so far from the woman I once knew. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you." But the damage had already been done. The trust that had held our marriage together, the foundation I had thought was unshakable, had crumbled. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time? Was I really so blind to what was happening right in front of me? "I don't know what to say to you," I replied, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I can't live in a marriage where I'm constantly questioning if I'm being lied to." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for me, but I pulled away. I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by her tears anymore. The damage wasn't just emotional, it was deep, and I could feel it gnawing away at me. That night, I left the house. I didn't want to be around her, not in that moment. I needed space, time to think. I stayed with a friend for a few days, wrestling with my emotions, trying to figure out what I should do. Divorce was an option, but it felt like such a drastic step. Could I really walk away from everything? From a life that we had built together? The idea of destroying her career, exposing the affair, all of it, it felt like a betrayal in itself. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the only way to hold her accountable for what she had done. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the part of me that still loved her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, I still cared for her deeply. The woman I had married, the woman I had fallen in love with, was still in there somewhere. Was there a way to fix this? Or had she already chosen a different path without me? I returned home after a few days of soul-searching, hoping to find some semblance of clarity. My wife was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She didn't look like the person I had once known, and that realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't know what to do anymore," I said, my voice raw. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this. And I don't know if I can stay in a relationship that's based on lies." She looked at me with desperation in her eyes. "Please, just give me a chance. I know I've messed up, but I need you. I love you, and I want to fix this. I want to be the woman I used to be for you. I've been so lost without you." But as much as I wanted to believe her, as much as I wanted to give her the chance to redeem herself, something inside me was telling me that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern, a repeated behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long. My heart ached as I thought about the future. Could I really trust her again? Could I ever feel safe in a relationship where trust had been shattered so completely? The thought of walking away from everything was unbearable. But the thought of staying, of living a lie, was even worse. I had to make a choice, and no matter what decision I made, it was going to change my life forever. I spent the next few days in turmoil, torn between two choices: destroy the man who had crossed boundaries with my wife and ruin her career in the process, or simply walk away from it all and start fresh. Neither option seemed right, but both carried their own consequences. If I exposed the affair, I'd be hurting her even more. Would that be worth it? Or would walking away, silently accepting what had happened, be the coward's way out? In the end, I couldn't bring myself to destroy her career. I still loved her in some way, and as angry as I was, I couldn't erase everything we had shared. But I also couldn't stay in a marriage that had been built on lies. So, I made the decision to leave. I packed my things and moved out, knowing that I was making the hardest decision of my life. It wasn't about revenge or about hurting her. It was about protecting my own sanity and my own well-being. I couldn't continue living in a relationship where trust was gone, where the foundation had cracked beyond repair. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll never fully understand what happened or why it all fell apart. But one thing is certain: I'm no longer the man who's afraid to make the hard choices. I'm taking control of my life again, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally free. Something wasn't adding up. I had been sensing it for a while, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was the little things: her moods changing, her distance, the way she spoke about her therapy sessions. I tried to dismiss the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It didn't make sense. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but the cracks were beginning to show. I couldn't help but feel like she was hiding something from me. I had always trusted her, believed in us. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we had worked through the tough times together. But now, as the days went by, I began to feel a growing distance between us. The intimacy we once shared had slowly faded. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. We no longer had those late night talks where we'd laugh about stupid things or share our fears and hopes. The connection that had once felt so strong now felt like it was slipping away, and I couldn't understand why. It was her therapist that started to trouble me. I had heard her mention him in passing, always praising how much progress she was making, how he helped her through difficult times. She had always been open about her therapy, and I supported it. I wanted her to get the help she needed. But there was something about the way she spoke about him, something in her voice when she described their sessions, that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't just admiration. There was a spark there, something more than what should have been there between a patient and a therapist. I tried to push it to the back of my mind. Maybe I was just being overprotective. But as time went on, the feeling grew stronger, and the doubts started to take root. Her therapist was exactly her type: charismatic, confident, charming. I could see the way she looked at him when she spoke about him, the way her eyes lit up. It wasn't just appreciation. It felt like something more. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, she was getting the intimacy she was missing from someone else. I didn't want to believe it, but the nagging suspicion wouldn't go away. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every moment I'd witnessed over the past few months. I knew I had to find out the truth. I couldn't keep living with this uncertainty. So, I did something I now regret. But at the time, it seemed like the only way to get answers. Last month, I placed a tracker in her car. I know it was wrong, invasive even, but I had to know. She was going to her therapy sessions regularly, and I thought I might learn something by tracking her movements. I watched as she left for her appointment, and when she didn't return home immediately, my heart began to race. The tracker showed her going to a different location before returning home a few hours later. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking things. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A week later, I followed her. I know now it was a desperate and unhealthy thing to do, but I couldn't stop myself. I waited until she went into her therapy session, and then I trailed behind her, careful not to let her see me. It wasn't like I was trying to catch her in the act. I just needed answers, the truth. The tracker confirmed my worst fears. It led me to a restaurant. I sat there, heart pounding, for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something to happen. I didn't know what I was hoping for: maybe to see her with a friend, or maybe for her to just go home. But when I saw her leave with him, her therapist, my heart dropped into my stomach. They were holding hands. Together. I could barely believe what I was seeing. Every emotion I had ever felt about her rushed through me in that moment. Anger, betrayal, confusion, heartbreak. I couldn't believe it. I had been married to this woman for years, and here she was, holding hands with another man. The man who was supposed to help her, guide her through her struggles, was now a part of the web of lies that was tearing us apart. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I didn't. I knew I had to have proof. I needed evidence. I wasted no time. I pulled out my phone and snapped picture after picture, capturing every moment, every piece of evidence that would prove what I had suspected all along. My wife was cheating on me, not just with anyone, but with the very person she trusted with her most vulnerable thoughts and emotions. Her therapist had crossed every boundary, every ethical line. It wasn't just an affair, it was an abuse of power. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. All I could think about was the betrayal. The images of them together haunted me. But I wasn't done. I needed more. I followed her to more therapy sessions, watching her every move. One day, I caught her going to his house. The thought of her walking into his home like she had every right to be there sent a wave of nausea through me. I kept documenting everything: photos, text messages, screenshots of conversations between them where they talked about how much better their connection was than ours. They mocked me. They mocked our marriage. I was disgusted. The man I had trusted with her well-being had taken advantage of her, using his position to exploit her vulnerability. And she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. They had made a joke out of my love, out of everything we had built together. It was clear now that their emotional connection was much deeper than I had imagined. They didn't care about me, about the years we'd spent together. They only cared about their secret, selfish affair. Once I had gathered enough evidence, I knew what I had to do. The divorce was inevitable. I had already started the paperwork, but I couldn't just walk away from this without making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. I copied all the evidence, every photo, every message, every screenshot, and sent it to the licensing board. I provided every detail I had, explaining how he had violated the trust of someone who had come to him for help, and how he had used his position to exploit my wife. I couldn't let him get away with it. The response came quickly. Within a week, I received a call from my wife. She was furious. She couldn't believe I had reported him. She accused me of being vindictive, heartless, trying to ruin his career out of spite. She told me I was the one who was wrong, that I had gone too far. I played dumb, acting like I didn't understand what she meant. But when she told me how awful I was for ruining his life, I calmly explained that he was the real jerk. He had broken every rule that therapists are supposed to follow. He had taken advantage of her in the most selfish way possible. I didn't care about his career. What mattered to me was that she had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and that was something I couldn't forgive. Now, the divorce is almost finalized. My wife's affair with her therapist has ended, and I'm moving on. He's tried reaching out to apologize, but I haven't responded. I'm done. It's over. There's no going back. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I won't be staying in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I'm ready to rebuild, to move on from the heartbreak and start fresh. There's no room for deceit in my life anymore. I'm determined to find a life that's honest, one that's free from the shadows of betrayal. What's next for me? I'm not sure. But I do know that whatever happens, I'm no longer a prisoner to the lies that held me captive for so long. I'm ready to embrace the future on my terms.